it's not really an extrovert's game or an introvert's game. It's more about, where do you get your energy from, setting yourself up for success. But I think more so than anything else, you have to figure out how to tell a story that is relatable with your audience, conveys the correct message, and ultimately simplifies it. And so I think writers actually have the advantage in this case, and I'll flip it that direction, where, I think great writers over time, not only understand their tone, understand what works, but they can shape different content depending on the audience.
Hello and welcome to the Write Podcast. I'm your host, Julie McCoy. Join me as I interview experts in the field and discuss hot content, copywriting, and marketing topics. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to episode 42 in the Write Podcast. Today, I have the honor of having Brian Fanzo on as my guest. Brian is the founder of iSocialFans. He's a millennial keynote speaker and podcaster. He hosts two podcasts, FOMO Fans and Smack Talk. Brian, thank you so much for coming on my show today.
Oh, my pleasure. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So our topic is all about how to build a speaking career. And I followed you for, I don't know how many years, but I love what you're doing in the industry. And you're kind of the social media influencer, but you do it through keynote speaking and you're super authentic. So just kudos to what you do every day.
Oh, thank you very much. That means a lot. It's, for me as a speaker, I think the number one compliment I get is that, I'm the same offline, the same on stage, and the same online. As everywhere is the same. It's a lot easier to live that life. So I appreciate those kind words.
That's so true. It's so much easier to live that life. I love that. Well, yes, absolutely. Well deserved. So my first question for you is just about your story. Where you are today is just awesome, but how did you get there? What's your backstory going into just how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So, I think everyone always has a unique path for where they arrive. And I think for me, I have a very, I'm actually a computer science major in college. I was big into, I still am. I love technology, computer science major with a concentration on web design. And after college, ended up taking like an entry-level help desk job with the U.S. government as a government contractor in a cybersecurity field. And then I ended up working there for 9 years. I turned that help desk job into a training job, which is then I had a bunch of employees underneath me. My team, we were responsible for a little over $9 million a year in a budget that we ran. We did training courses around the world. So I got to travel around the world. I'm very blessed. I've been to 74 countries as of right now. And a lot of that was when I worked for the U.S. government in cybersecurity. And so I did that for a long while, for about 9 years. And then I decided that it wasn't really technology that I loved per se. It was more helping people embrace change and helping people look at technology and where it can take them. So then I ended up working for a startup out of Arizona, out of Phoenix, Arizona, a data center company that was a startup out of Phoenix, where I kind of drafted my dream job, which was a technology evangelist, which really just meant I became the face of the company, was able to work with all of the teams. I got to work with the marketing team, the product team, the sales team, with one job. And my job was really just to simplify what was going on. So working with our clients, working with our customers. And then a little over 4.5 years ago, I decided that I had done a big enterprise job. I had done the startup job, and then I dove into entrepreneurship. So I've been an entrepreneur for about 4.5 years. 3 years ago, I would say 20% of my business was speaking. About 80% of my business was consulting and some clients that I had done some work with, and of course my two podcasts. And this year, it's 80% of my revenue is speaking, and next year my goal is for it to be about 90%. So looking to speak at about 60 events in 2019. But yeah, unique background. I would say for me, it allows me to use a lot of examples, and I can relate with just about every audience. And but it's not your typical marketing or social media path, that's for sure.
Yes. No, I love that journey. I think it really gives you that unique edge. And like you said, you know, technology changes so fast. And so you having that knowledge of computers probably really plays into that. So that's pretty cool.
It does. And I also think, you know, and the other thing about it is that, you know, a lot of people, you know, I think you have to, you know, with the way that the world is today, I think this is what I talk about on stage, but it kind of fits into my career. The rate of change today, like how fast change happens, is unlike any time in history, where, you know, for a long while, you know, technology would stay the same for 15 or 20 years. And now it's 3 or 4 years if we're lucky, and social media networks come and go. Wow. The way that we market comes and goes. And so, you know, I'm very blessed that I get to help kind of people embrace that and kind of set themselves up for all of that, you know, change around, you know, either being led by technology or being led by consumer demands, which are really technology driven.
That's a great way to transition into our next questions. So talking about what you actually do, speaking, which is really hard, especially I think those of us listening, those in my audience, I'm a writer, and that's a lot of times the people I talk to, my audience. So going from writing to speaking is like, it's such a change, especially if like we're introverts, and it's really hard to do that. And like, for one, podcasting has helped me, but it's still kind of momentous to think about taking on stage speaking. So have you ever had fears there? How did you overcome that?
So it's funny because as you were saying that, I'm thinking, man, those that are great writers, that's intimidating for me. I am not the great writer on that side. You know, my mom likes to say, my mom likes to, you know, that I came out of the womb talking, and I've always been a talker. I talk fast. And I now have a career that allows me to do that. But, you know, interestingly enough, you know, the thing that surprises me, or not surprises me, but you often hear, you know, that people, you know, they fear public speaking more so than skydiving, or other things that go on. But there's also an element of, you know, really what public speaking is. And I think when you said that, when you were just explaining that a little bit, you talked about your podcast helping you. And I credit my podcast a lot, but I also just, you know, I believe everybody has a story to tell. And the hardest part when I coach some other speakers, I run a mastermind group. Interestingly enough, and this will probably surprise you, is that well over 80% of speakers that are paid professional speakers classify themselves as introverts. So you would think most just assume, because you're on stage, but, you know, even like, so my hero in speaking, the one that I look up to the most in this space is Scott Stratton. He hosts a podcast called Unmarketing. He's the author of Unmarketing and Unselling. But he's a massive introvert. And it's hilarious because the two of us on stage have a very similar dynamic. We are very loud and passionate and verbose. But for me, when I get off stage, I'm ready to run through a wall. I can, you know, stay out to the end of the night. I gain all that energy off the audience. Where he, one of the best presentations I've ever seen given, he was the one that gave it at a big IBM event that we were at, and he immediately was like, "Well, just leave me alone for a couple hours. I need to go into my hotel room." And I was like, "Wait a minute, why are we not going out celebrating?" So I think that's kind of the first thing to think about, is that it's not really an extrovert's game or an introvert's game. It's more about, you know, where do you get your energy from, setting yourself up for success. But I think more so than anything else, you have to figure out how to tell a story that is relatable with your audience, conveys the correct message, and ultimately simplifies it. And so I think writers actually have the advantage in this case, and I'll flip it that direction, where, you know, I think great writers over time, you know, not only understand their tone, understand what works, but they can shape different content depending on the audience, depending on where they're reading it. You know, if I was giving something to someone that's a great writer, and I told them that a majority of your audience is going to read this, that is me under the age of 35, and they're going to read this on their mobile device, I believe great writers can craft the message to better understand that. And that's a skill set that is really hard to teach for speakers. I think great speakers today, that is an advantage they have, is that, they get to talk to different audiences, but they can really craft that message differently. And I've been very blessed. I wouldn't say I don't get nervous. I get excited for getting on stage. I truly treasure being on stage. But interestingly enough, I was diagnosed ADHD at 31 years old. And for me, the place where I'm most zen, the place where I think my brain is the calmest is actually when I'm on stage.
Wow.
Because I'm reading the audience. I'm knowing where my content is going. I'm tracking how much time I have. I'm remembering what's coming up next. I'm talking about what's currently on the slide. So these are all things that really help me a lot. But I started my career, and this is something I like to, always, public speaking is definitely not an overnight success game. And I also think, becoming someone that's paid to do it is an even longer game. But, I started in 2005, and I had a boss that just pretty much came to me and said, you're the only non-white-haired, gray-haired guy in our cybersecurity team. We want to teach you how to be a presenter so that you're able to convey what we do as a team to the executives and bosses that were going on. So 2005, I got sent to I would say a communication course, a communication camp. And a lot of it was, the traditional things that most people have heard, not talking with your hands, not talking too fast. A lot of that, I would say, old school mentality. But one of the things that really resonated with me was that, people, they want to know that you care about what you're talking about, and that kind of trumps everything else that you do. And so when I'm on stage, I talk with my hands. I talk really fast. I move all across the stage, but it's something that I've been blessed for. And I've had the entire gamut of a speaking career, because when I started, I was working for the government and I was speaking at government events. And it was very nice. I was being able to represent my team. I went and worked for the startup company, and out of the startup company, I've spoke at the biggest events of my life, because my startup that I was working for, we would sponsor big events like South by Southwest and VMware and AWS, Amazon Web Services, and I spoke at all of these events. I shared the stage with Steve Wozniak, one of the founders of Apple. I've been on, I've been very blessed to be on stages with Michelle Obama and a lot of other big name speakers. But, interestingly enough, when I left that startup, I tried, to pivot as I was getting more in marketing, and I attempted to speak in the marketing space after I was a closing keynote for 13,000 people at an event in San Francisco in 2013. But that was the reason I got that gig was because my company had sponsored for it, right? So in 2014, I'm on my own. I go to apply for a much smaller event in the marketing space, and they told me, well, you'd be better off attending. Like they couldn't even give me a side stage or a so for me, I've had to reinvent myself, I think, 3 times in the speaking space. I went from a brand speaker to a sponsored speaker to someone that was speaking really as like a side opportunity to where now it's my full-time business and what I do for a living. But it's an interesting journey. I can tell you a lot of my good friends that are speakers have all come across this in different ways. Some are celebrities, some are great authors. Mark Schaefer is someone that comes to mind. He is a great author and great writer, and he is really good at conveying that on stage. I would argue Simon Sinek is a little bit of a different, rarity, where Simon caught lightning in a bottle with his talk that was a TEDx that turned into a TED, where he had to learn to become a writer and then learn how to convey his message outside of that. So I think one of the things about speaking, and I think for writers, you have an advantage, is that you understand how to craft a message in a way that you convey your message. The big difference there is you have to do it kind of in real time to different audiences on stage. But I think for many speakers, I wish they had the mindset of a writer to start with, compared to that's something trying to teach somebody over a long period of time.
Wow, that's a really cool way to put that. And it makes so much sense, because gosh, for me, I could sit down and write almost anything at this point after 7 years of just doing that. I mean, I've written SEO articles on trash bags, for goodness sakes. So, I can write on anything and make it engaging, add a story. So yeah, I love how you put that. That makes so much sense. So whenever it comes to marketing yourself, which is another tough area. Like takes a lot of time. We have to learn how to do it. Is there unique ways you've positioned yourself to stand out and earn those high paid speaking engagements?
I'm a big believer in zigging when everyone's zagging. But I think an advantage, if you have a book, that's a huge advantage when you're speaking. I think a book, for me, having a book would probably, I would say, increase my speaking fees by at least 50%. I would say on the low side, because most people want to know that your message of what you deliver is so well ingrained in who you are, and you're able to convey it, and you've invested the time to do it, that you've put it into a book. Now, I do not have a book, so I don't have a book yet. That's something definitely that I'm currently working on. But I think having a book is a big step. It's also one of those things where a lot of people become a speaker because of I would say either they have one message or one topic. Maybe they were the CEO of a brand or maybe a platform. For me, I love, I will say this, and I mean it with all my heart, is that, I found my dream job. My dream job is being a public speaker, and I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And, interestingly enough, I don't have the criteria that most people told me that I needed to have, right? I need a book. I need to be a CEO of a company. I need to have this long speaker reel. I should align myself with bureaus or agents. Right now I'm a team of one. But what I've decided to do is, I work really hard at trying to, think, and my philosophy in marketing is called think like a fan. And my marketing as a speaker is really think like a fan. And what I try to do is, okay, if I put myself in the shoes of my audience, if I put myself in the shoes of those that are hiring speakers, what can I provide them that goes above and beyond? And I remember this day really, it was in 2013. I was at an event called Social Fresh in Orlando, Florida. And Jay Baer was speaking there along with Jason Miller of LinkedIn, Sarah Evans, who was known as PR Sarah Evans. There were some really big names that were speaking there. And at this event, Jason Keith, who puts it on, he really, inspires people, his speakers, to be a part of the event and be a part of the community. But I remember watching Jay Baer provide this amazing keynote, and then he sat in the front row and watched other people speak. And I remember thinking, like, wow, that's if one day when I'm speaking in this space, I'm going to become the speaker that is part of the community and part of the event, not a fly in and fly out speaker, which I think is the traditional way of doing it. And so, I offer my packages when people hire me to speak. They don't hire me for just the hour I'm on stage. They hire me for the entire day. They can use me to as much as or as little as they want. I also try really hard to be a part of the event, tweeting on the hashtag. I provide them with videos ahead of time that they can use for Facebook ads. I do a follow-up video webinar to answer any questions that I wasn't able to provide, on stage or at the event. And so I really try hard to provide a maximum amount of value beyond what I do just on stage. And I think that, that definitely helps. I will say, it also helps because I create a lot of content myself. I do at least 3 videos a week. I host 2 podcasts, a third podcast that will be coming out very shortly. So I will host 3 podcasts a week. I maintain my own website. I share a lot on social media. I've not missed a day on Instagram stories since Instagram stories comes out. And so for me, a lot of my speaking business is built through social media relationships, my free social media content, which includes my blog, my podcast, my videos that I create. And it's those relationships. I get, a lot of my leads come from other speakers. They come from people that follow me on social media, big fans of my podcast. I got an email just about 2 weeks ago, and someone had said they were, a follower of mine for a long time, but they weren't sure where I would fit in. And then they listened to my podcast about luxury travel and my thoughts on hospitality. And the light bulb went off, and now we're negotiating a contract for me to go speak there for a lot of money, over $20,000 for this one gig.
Wow.
And that was all because I created great content. So for those that are creating great content out there, I am the spitting example that my content is my business development. I've never applied for a speaking role. Everyone has been inbound to me, and I attest that to my outbound strategy is my podcast, is my blogging, and is my social media.
Isn't inbound the best?
It is.
It's
It is the best.
amazing. Oh my gosh. I love that because that's how we obtain like every single one of our agency leads in my content agency. You know, we don't ever cold pitch anyone. I think I've only done that. I have done it in the past, I will be honest, but only like to 2 people total, and we've served thousands of clients. So yeah, inbound is amazing, and I think that's a great case study of someone listening to your podcast and then going, oh wow, he knows what he's talking about, and then seeking you out. Love that. That is great. So talking about what you speak about, our last question, I saw this in a tweet recently that you posted that you're comfortable with almost any topic. And I really resonated with that because that's something else I've done throughout the years in our agency. We really don't align with just one industry. And we have gotten some negativity for that because, you know, you should be in a niche. That's what everyone is saying. So how would you describe the topics you handle and that wide variety of topics?
So this is a great one. And actually, I think when you and I were talking earlier this year about me bringing you guys on, which probably will still happen at some point.
Cool.
I really appreciate that. And I think for those that are listening, this is the way I like to shape this discussion: is that if you have a niche or a niche that you own, like if you have something very specific that you feel you are really good at and you are very well known for it, I say own it, go all in on it. Make the very most of that. I mean, I think that is so powerful. But there is a mass majority of us, there's a bigger group of us that aren't sure what our niche is. And we're like, well, we like to do this and we like this type of client. And sometimes we like to do this and we would love to help this person. But if this person also came up. And the thing that I was told for many, many, many years was, Brian, you will not be successful until you find your niche. Like you have to find that one tiny, small sliver. And here's the thing. I spent a couple years trying to do that, and I was miserable. It was not who I was. And so this is how I look at it and say, your niche is really what that specialty, the specialty that I bring is that I believe I can relate with every audience. And this goes to you should see the events that I speak at, right? I spoke at an event called Bark World, which is for pet influencers. There was actually more dogs in the audience than there were people.
That's great.
I spoke at the U.S. Sailing Leadership Forum. I spoke at South by Southwest. I spoke at Computer Electronics Show, CES. I've spoken in Poland at InfoShare. I've spoken at, I'd say military bases. I've spoken in the financial tech space. This year alone, I've done 8 events in the travel and hospitality industry. Where I'm at right now, I'm speaking at the Internet Summit tomorrow, and then I'm flying to San Francisco speaking at the B2B Marketing Summit there on Thursday. And then next week, I'm speaking at the Pro Beauty Professionals Association event in Scottsdale. And so really what it comes down to me is like I love personalizing my message. I love the challenge of a new audience. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that now I will tell you there's many people that will say, well, Brian, what are you known to speak on? And I usually give like 5 topics that I can speak on. And that's usually not a good thing because usually that confuses the people wanting to hire you. And I will say it's something that I'm working on. But ultimately what I like to say is that I translate the geek speak around emerging technology and digital marketing. And so if there's something around digital marketing or emerging technology, so my talk tomorrow is about the customer experience and how we need to think like a fan and change our mentality on that experience. My talk on Thursday is kind of what my book is being built on, which is called Press the Damn Button, which is inspiring people to tell their story and find their voice. The following week, my topic is on influencer marketing, discovering the girl or boy next door that can change your business. The talk I'm giving at the end of this month is really about the millennial mindset and how we can relate with millennials and Gen Z consumers. So for me, my topics range, but it's also my audience's range. And I think eventually what my goal will be is that I'll have 3 main general topics that I talk on. But I believe I will never silo myself and only talk about certain industries. But with that being said, if you have a niche, if someone has a niche, I can't because I I sometimes even call myself this. I'm like the anti-niche person.
That's great.
But I'm actually not that, because if someone one of the people that I look up to a lot, Pat Flynn, he hosts a podcast called Smart Passive Income. I mean, he is a genius, but he's also a genius because he has mastered financial, responsibility and productivity and that passive income model. And he has gone all in, and I would say he has a niche, and he is making 10 times more money than I am with his niche. So I think if you have it, I'm all for owning it. But if you don't have one, I don't think you have to be discouraged and feel like you need one. And it doesn't mean that one day you won't find one. But for me, most of the reason that I've been able to speak at these crazy big events and do a little bit of everything is because I'm open to doing just about anything and everything for anyone.
That's great. And just like you said, I think you can kind of fit into either box. It really depends on what you do, what you're good at, really, because you're good at what you said, translating the geek speak. And you can do that for really any industry. So I think that's really great to think that way. You don't really have to do one or the other and stay there.
Correct. And I think, like I said, we started off this conversation, everything changes so rapidly. And so I think, if what you're doing right now isn't your only focus, I would say, I credit this earlier. I didn't really go into depth, but for me, I wanted to figure out how I could, I wasn't a traditional writer. Grammar is something I've always struggled with. I know for all those that are listening to this are like, what? But my poor high school teachers, grammar was just not my thing. And I was discouraged. I blogged for my company, and I had a boss come down to me he wasn't my boss very long, but he came to me and said, Brian, I love what you're trying to do for our company, but you write like you talk, and we don't want that for our message. And I spent 3 years not telling my story from 2011 to 2014. And so I think for everybody, it's about finding your outlet and then kind of growing it from there. And I launched a podcast in 2014, and that podcast, and I also had an interview show that I was running, and the two of them combined kind of started to take off, and I started to realize, hey, my message matters. Hey, it really works. And so I think for everyone that's out there, as you can't figure out what your niche is or what your career path is or what you want to do for the rest of your life until you try a bunch of different things. And I'm very blessed that I tried a whole different things because it's led me to become, to find my dream job now. But I don't believe I would have found this if I would have just narrowed it down too early.
Yes, I love that. It's okay to be in that place, still looking for technically what you want to do when you grow up.
Exactly. And I'm okay. I'm 37 years old, and I'm okay still figuring out what I want to be when I'm no longer a Toys R Us kid.
Well, I'm 27 and I'm still kind of walking into everything myself. So, well, this was great. I really appreciate everything you shared and just how open you are to share everything you know. I think that's one reason we all really like you, and you're just someone that I love to follow. So definitely go check Brian Fanzo out at iSocialFans. That's your Twitter, Instagram, right?
Everything. Yeah. Consistency matters. So I'm iSocialFans with a Z at the end, iSocialFans with a Z at the end. And that's where I'm at on all the different channels. But no, I'm excited to be on here. I love what you're building. I love the community you're building. The business you're building, the amount of people that you're able to employ by following your passion. I also say, I think, for those that are listening to this, and I'll give you credit, I think there's a lot of people that can talk the talk. There's a lot of people that, authenticity is about putting yourself out there, sharing your vulnerabilities, but also being okay with being real. And I know your story and what you've gone through and what you've been writing recently. You and I follow each other pretty closely. You're an inspiration for that, right? And you're talking about hard topics and things that maybe most people are learning for the first time about you, or most are afraid to talk about in their own lives. But you inspire, so many, including me, to do that. And so, it means a lot when you say that, because I try to share the good, the bad, the ugly. I cry on my Snapchat and Instagram. I'm perfectly okay talking about when I lose a gig or when I gain a gig or how I did things. And I appreciate you doing the same. And I feel like I know you better. I feel like I'm a fan of you and your husband, and just through what I'm able to see through social media and your writing. And I think lots of people can learn from that. And so much of my success has been putting myself out there and not being afraid to be myself everywhere. And you're a great ambassador of that. So thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. That means a lot. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode with the amazing Brian Fanzo. He has so much to share. I definitely go recommend following him on Twitter at iSocialFans, and check out his podcast, FOMO Fans, and Smack Talk for some great tips on social media for almost any industry. How crazy is it that 2019 is around the corner? It's just blowing my mind how quickly this year came to an end. If you're a freelancer, entrepreneur, you work in an agency setting, you might find some value from my 2 training courses. I have one course out that's super intensive that teaches every single step on content strategy. That course is called the Content Strategy and Marketing Course. It's a 6-week training program, kind of like a boot camp, to take you all the way from zero to hero in content marketing. You can check it out at contentstrategycourse.com. And just in time for the new year, I relaunched my writing course, the Expert SEO Content Writer. This course is a 1-week intensive course. That's right, you can literally finish it inside 1 week. That teaches you every step involved in profitable SEO content writing. So go check that course out at writingcourse.expresswriters.com. And if you enjoy the Right Podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button in iTunes. I look forward to having you back here for my next episode.